They sent me to derelict Bay 17 because they had run out of ways to insult me with words. That is not self-pity. That is the documented fact. Supervisor Hendricks wrote it in his reassignment brief. Not in those words, of course, but I have read enough bureaucratic shorthand to know what's suitable for independent atmospheric survey maintenance in non-operational storage facilities means when it follows 14 years of exemplary colonist service. It means, we are done with you. Go somewhere quiet and stop asking questions we do not wish to answer. So I went. Bay 17 sits at the far end of the Verath station complex, behind 3 sets of pressure doors that haven't been cycled in 60 years, and a maintenance corridor that smells of cold iron and very old grief. The bay itself is the size of a small city block, vaulted ceiling 40 meters overhead. Pale work lighting that the station AI keeps at 40% because nothing in that bay is considered worth illuminating fully. The floor is bare poured alloy, swept clean by automated brushes that run their circuits regardless of whether any human being is present to care. And in the center of it, the Valdris. I had read the file on the walk over, because reading files is something I do when I am nervous, and I was very nervous. The Valdris predates the colony expansion by somewhere between 9 and 11,000 years, depending on which dating methodology you trust. It was found adrift in the outer dark by a survey probe, towed to Verath, and sealed in Bay 17 when 3 separate engineering teams failed to determine how to open it, and when Admiral Cashapren's full contact team went silent for 47 minutes inside the bay and emerged unable to explain what they had seen or heard. The Galactic Survey Authority simply locked the doors and wrote non-operational cultural artifact. Restricted access across every file associated with the hull. The Valdris had refused everyone. It had refused engineers and admirals, linguists and xenoarchaeologists, a decorated war captain who brought a full complement of officers and left them all standing outside while he walked in alone, and walked back out 4 minutes later with white hair where there had been brown. It had refused delegations and diplomats, and a 12-person committee convened specifically to determine whether it could be reasoned with. It had sat there, sealed and patient, for 60 years of human contact and 10,000 years before that. And now they had sent me, Marin Sokolic, civilian colonist 3rd grade, former agricultural infrastructure coordinator, current disgrace, to run atmospheric seal integrity checks on the bay's outer ring. Not on the ship. I was not cleared to approach the ship. My mandate was the 4 pressure seams along the bay's eastern wall and the 2 humidity sensors on the north bulkhead that the automated report said were drifting. I want to be precise about this because it matters. I was not there to touch the Valdris. I was not there to speak to it, invoke it, challenge it, or do anything at all except check 6 pieces of peripheral equipment and file a report that no one would read for 60 days. I set down my kit near the eastern wall and got to work. The first seal read clean. The second was borderline. I logged it and moved on. The humidity sensors on the north bulkhead were indeed drifting, by a margin that fell inside acceptable parameters but outside tidy ones, and I adjusted both by hand because the remote calibration interface had long since stopped responding. Standard work. The kind of work that had filled a year of my life before Hendricks wrote his brief, and filled the years before that with other versions of itself. Small, careful, necessary tasks that no one celebrated and everyone required. I was kneeling at the second humidity sensor, with the calibration tool seated properly and my attention on the readout, when the bay went quiet in a way bays do not go quiet. You understand what I mean if you have spent enough time in working facilities. A bay like 17 has ambient sound, the hum of the atmospheric processors, the low periodic tick of the lighting array, the faint settling sounds of a pressurized structure under continuous load. All of that continued, but underneath it, something shifted. The quality of the air changed the way air changes before a storm, if storms were composed of attention rather than moisture. I stayed still. I kept my eyes on my readout. I am not entirely certain why. Some part of me understood, in a way that did not yet have language, that standing up and turning around was a thing I needed to do slowly and with full intention, or not at all. I capped the calibration tool, I stood up, I turned around. The Valdres had a figure mounted at its prow. I had noted it in the file. A sentinel form, humanoid, roughly 3 meters tall, carved from the same dark composite as the hull, a material that no analysis had been able to fully characterize, something between stone and metal that ate light rather than reflecting it. The figure had been catalogued as decorative. It had been photographed from 15 angles. It had not moved in 60 years of human observation. Its left arm was extended toward me. Not dramatically, not with any theatrical sweep. The arm had simply moved, over whatever span of time I had spent working with my back to it, from its resting position across the sentinel's chest to a position that pointed quietly, with the deliberate patience of something that has been waiting a very long time and has finally stopped waiting directly at me. I did not run. I have thought about this afterward, and I believe the reason I did not run was that the gesture was not threatening. It was recognizing. There is a difference, and the body knows the difference even when the mind is still processing, and my body knew. I walked toward it. The distance across the bay floor felt very long and also somehow not long enough. I was aware of the sound my boots made on the alloy, and the sound the atmospheric processors made, and the sound of my own breath, which was steady in a way that surprised me. I stopped at the base of the Valdres's hull, at the edge of the shadow it cast under the 40% lighting, and I looked up at the sentinel's face. The file had said, "No discernible facial features." I had read that 3 times on my walk over and accepted it as written. The file was wrong, or the file had been written by people who looked at the sentinel from a distance and concluded from that distance that what they were seeing was a blank surface. Up close, in the shadow of the hull with my neck tilted back and the sentinel's extended arm above me, I could see the face clearly. It was not human, but it was a face composed and deliberate and very old, with an expression that I did not have a name for until later. When I looked it up and found that the closest word in any language I speak is the one we use for the expression on someone's face when they have kept a promise they were not certain they would live to keep. The chest plate of the sentinel opened. Not violently, not with the sound of things breaking. It opened the way a door opens when the person inside has been listening for your footstep on the walk and reaches the latch before you knock, smooth, unhurried, expected. A column of warm amber light moved outward from the opening and settled around me, and it was warm in the literal sense, the way sunlight through glass is warm, and the grief that the corridor outside had smelled of the 60 years of it, the 10,000 years of it, lifted slightly. The voice that came from the open chest was not loud. It did not need to be. It was the voice of something that had crossed time on patience alone and had arrived at last at the other side of its long wait. "Last crew standing," it said. "I have been waiting." I stood there for what felt like a long time. I don't know how long it actually was. The atmospheric processors kept running. The light stayed at 40%. They had sent me here because they were done with me. They had written my file in the language of finished things, non-operational, restricted, not worth full illumination. They had looked at me the way the survey teams had looked at the Valdres, from a safe distance, for long enough to decide that nothing of value remained, and then they had walked away and locked the door. I thought about Hendrix's reassignment brief. I thought about 14 years of clean atmospheric seals and calibrated humidity sensors, and the carefully assembled fact of my competence, which had never been sufficient for the people I was competent in service of. I thought about 10,000 years. Then I put my hand on the hull of the Valdres. Its surface was not cold. It had never been cold. It was warm and quiet and real. And I said out loud to the sentinel and the ship and the 60 years of silence in Bay 17, "Show me." And it did.